Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Academy. Today we're going to continue in chapter 11, and we're just going to cover two sentences, 18 and 19. This part of the chapter, actually a lot of this chapter, really, I think Sun Tzu is trying to reinforce things he's already said. And some of the things he talks about, they may sound familiar because of previous episodes. So, as we go through this, I'm going to try to pick out, I think, what he's trying to tell us. So let's start with sentence 18. If asked how to cope with a great host of the enemy, in orderly array, and on the point of marching to the attack, I should say, begin by seizing something which your opponent holds dear. Then he will be amenable to your will. Rapidity is the essence of war. Take advantage of the enemy's unreadiness, make your way by unexpected routes, and attack unguarded spots. Okay, it doesn't sound like much there, but let's unpack it. So sentence 18, he kind of says something a little differently than he said before. Same concept though. Seize something that your opponent finds valuable. Okay, very, very similar to back in chapter 3, sentence 3. Now, in all honesty, the commentators actually differ on what they think Sun Tzu really means here. In one of the cases, it's Sao Kung. He thinks it's some strategical advantage on which his enemy's depending. You want to take that advantage. But Tu Mu has a slightly different take. He looks at he says the three things which the enemy is anxious to do and on the accomplishment of which his success depends are 1, to capture our favorable position, 2, to ravage our cultivated land, and to guard his own communications. Well, obviously ravaging our own resources or land, that's not really comes to play on tabletop. But the idea of taking our favorable position, or guarding their communications, or even Cao Kung's thing of strategical advantage, these give us a kind of a window into what the Sun Tzu's thinking about. So the way I want to approach this is think in these terms. First, it really is important to see, or be able to see, what it is your opponent thinks is important. Now, in most cases, the way our games are set up, usually it's going to be an objective that is part of the mission, part of the scenario. And that's pretty clear, and that's good. But if you're going for that objective, and there's only one, and you're both going for it, like a King of the Hill mission or something, that makes this thing kind of hard to play on, really. In asymmetrical scenarios where you've got differing objectives for each side, this actually comes into play a lot more readily, where you need to discern what it is the opponent is going after and prevent him from achieving it, or maybe threaten something that he has to protect while he goes after his. So, for example, let's say there's multiple objectives on the table. Even in a symmetrical campaign or mission, there's maybe 1 or 2 in his deployment zone or his side of the table and a couple in your half. Well, obviously he's going to want to take yours. He'll try to protect his a little bit, but if you threaten one of his early, well, you are starting to dictate terms of the battle, because now he isn't as free to sally forward and get your objectives because he has a large portion of your army staring down on one of his that he needs to protect. So looking at objectives and trying to figure out how can we threaten or take an objective or use an objective to control or influence our opponent's next move. That's one of the aspects here. Another aspect is maybe look at what if he has a particular unit that he's really he thinks is important. Now, I'm going to warn you now, good players will just focus on the objectives, and they'll gladly sacrifice a unit, even if it's an important one, just to ensure the objectives are met. But not every player will do that, and even the good players sometimes misjudge how effectively they can retake an objective or what have you, or how maybe they'll think that their unit is a little bit more important right now, and they need to protect it right now as opposed to letting it die so early. Their plan might rely too heavily on it early on in the game. So you threaten that unit. You force the issue by concentrating your force against it, your energy, your mass. All these tactical terms, strategic terms we talked about before. You focus your energy, your power, your combat capability against that one key unit, and that kind of forces the opponent to protect it a little bit longer because he doesn't want it to survive long enough to do something. And then that'll divert forces, potentially. Sometimes, though, even when you've got, let's do King of the Hill scenario is a perfect one, where, the mission objective isn't necessarily something you can use to influence your opponent. So let's look at the lay of the terrain. Where on the table do you have a place that kind of controls your opponent's movement or influences it? For example, if you have a choke point, a bridge, a narrow pass, a narrow street that the opponent will want to use because it's the quickest way to get to the objective, you will want to occupy that first. You may not have a strategic advantage to taking it, except that you divert your enemy's attention off the objective and onto freeing up that space, right? It also keeps him kind of hemmed in. You are starting to control and influence your opponent, and that's really what Sun Tzu's trying to talk about. By taking something your opponent finds valuable, that narrow street, that objective, that unit that is there, he will start to do kind of what you're wanting him to do, assuming you have a plan of, just like in chess, you move one piece because you want your opponent to move a different piece to a certain area. That's what you're trying to do here. So, again, the objectives, an important unit, or even a position on the table. Now, I want to go back to asymmetrical missions because personally, I like asymmetrical missions. I want to say asymmetrical missions, asymmetrical objectives, where both sides are going after something slightly different, because that's really the way things are in most tactical level combats. Your goal for each side is different. Okay, it may not be seizing a certain point on the battlefield. One army, that may be what they need to do. They need to take this one spot, but the other one needs to maintain their line. Those can both exist on the battlefield, and they can both be accomplished by both opponents, or by neither. If the opponent is prevented from taking that one location, but you've taken so many casualties that you now have a thinly held line, you really haven't actually achieved your objective either. So the idea of asymmetrical objectives really is something that, when you have an opportunity to play them, they're a lot of fun. But they're challenging because you don't have that simplicity of, I know what the opponent wants to do. You have to discern it. Sometimes they're known, those objectives are known, sometimes they're not. And understanding is really the key here. Understand what the objective is and how you could threaten that objective so that the opponent will do something in your favor. A good example would be if you need to hold your line, but your opponent does have this objective to take that one spot, get to that spot first. Now he is not going to focus on your line that you need to hold. He's going to focus on that objective because now it's occupied. You've now directed where he's going to apply most of his pressure. All right. Now, I included sentence 19 in this video because I think it pairs up really well. Because once you do understand what it is that's valuable to your opponent and you want to go for that, well, now you need to realize speed is critical. You need to move swiftly, whether it's physical movement on the board or just making the decision quickly, actually all of it together, so that when it happens, you actually will force your opponent to start thinking along the lines you want him to earlier in the game. And that, the longer you have control over your opponent, or the longer you have influence over your opponent's decisions in this way, the better the battle's going to go for you, assuming dice rolls don't get in the way. Okay. There's a couple things that Sun Tzu brings out about the rapidity. Not just the fact you got to move quickly, but you want to watch for places where your opponent's not ready. Maybe his unit, a unit has not achieved a certain spot in, like, for example, a place of cover that they're wanting to go to. hit them quick before they get there. That's your chance. If you have the chance to strike at it, go, right? Attack by, unexpected routes. A lot of games have different versions of coming in off the side of the table or rear of the table or some other direction instead of just straight up the middle, right? Or in the front. Use that. It's an unexpected route. Send one of your units in a circular pattern around his force. If he's expecting you to charge, move everything forward and hit him with this line of units, and part of your force dashes off to the side, he's not expecting it. He won't be in a position necessarily right away to deal with it. It could offer an opportunity for him to start hesitating and start diverting units, which is going to be detrimental to him. And then his last point was, part of the rapidity is attacking unguarded spots. Now, you need to do this quickly because if the opponent realizes it's unguarded, he's going to cover it right away. So once you see an opening, be ready to exploit it. So this may take you some time to first of all see it, but secondly, kind of prepare your moves in such a way that your army's in a position to seize on these unguarded objectives or unguarded spots or unexpected routes. Okay, so all of it though has to happen as quickly as you can, and by setting yourself up, you'll be able to do that. Okay, so that's what sentences 18 and 19 really have to do with today in chapter 11. So thank you for sticking with me. Share, like, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next edition of the Academy. Bye-bye.